My father kicked me out of the house with the DNA test papers in his hand while my golden child brother just smiled. But no one ever taught him how to read paternity results. He got them completely wrong. It's hard to put into words what I'm feeling right now. I had a family, or at least I thought I did, but everything changed because of a single piece of paper. And the worst part? Deep down, I think I always knew something wasn't right. For as long as I can remember, I felt like no one in my family truly wanted me. My father, Robert, made it clear that I would never measure up to my older brother, Nick. At first, I thought it was because Nick was a boy, the son my dad always wanted, while I was just a girl. But the truth was something else entirely. It took me years to realize why my father resented me so much. It was like he had always believed I wasn't his daughter. Nick, on the other hand, was his perfect copy. He had the same sharp features, the same dark brown hair, the same intense stare. Meanwhile, I looked nothing like either of my parents. People even asked me if I was adopted. It hurt. And now, just over a week ago, everything finally came to light. That family dinner had been tense from the start. My father barely touched his food, which was unusual. Normally, he'd be busy bragging about Nick's accomplishments, no matter how small. Then, without warning, he slammed a stack of papers onto the table. He declared that I wasn't his daughter, that I was the child of a cheating woman. He had taken a DNA test for both me and Nick, and according to him, the results confirmed his worst suspicions. I wasn't his daughter. I was proof of my mother's betrayal. That was why I was never good enough, why he had never loved me. My mother said nothing. She just sat there with tears in her eyes. But she didn't deny it. She didn't defend me. And that told me everything I needed to know. It explained why my father had never loved me. I had always known he didn't care about me, but hearing him say it out loud, that I never belonged, that I had no place in this family, was a pain I wasn't ready for. Then he told me to leave. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My father had always been cold, but this was something else. I begged him, please don't do this. I pleaded with him to reconsider. It wasn't my fault. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, but he didn't care. His decision was final. I turned to my mother, hoping for some kind of support, but she just shook her head, staring at the table. She wouldn't fight for me. She wouldn't even look at me. Nick sat across from me and let out a quiet chuckle. He had always enjoyed my misery, and this moment was no different. I begged him, crying and on my knees, to let me stay. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had spent my whole life trying to be the daughter they wanted, only to be thrown away like I was nothing. But my father wouldn't budge. He kept repeating that I was no longer welcome. Then, before I could even process it, he raised his hand and slapped me. It wasn't just a slap, it was a full-force hit across my face, like he was blaming me for everything. That was it. There was nothing left to fight for. I grabbed a few of my things and walked out of the house slowly, because I had nowhere to go. I thought that if I walked slow enough, maybe I'd have more time to come up with a plan. I ended up at my friend Sophia's door. The moment she saw me, she pulled me inside. For the rest of the week, I barely moved. I refused to leave her apartment, refused to eat, refused to talk. I curled up in bed and let the days pass. The DNA test sat untouched on the nightstand, and I didn't even know why I had taken it with me. Couldn't look at it. I was terrified that reading it would confirm everything. And then, I really wouldn't have a family anymore. But after 7 long days of isolation, something inside me shifted. I had to know the truth, and then I saw it. I read it once, then again, and suddenly, I started shaking, for a completely different reason. My father had misread the results. Nick was the one who wasn't his biological son, not me. Nick, the golden child, the one my father adored, the one he put on a pedestal, wasn't even his. You see, my father had been so desperate to prove that I didn't belong, he hadn't even bothered to read the results correctly. His hatred for me was so strong, it blinded him to the truth. Suddenly, everything made sense. My mother's reaction, the way she just sat there in silence, the fear in her eyes, it wasn't just guilt, it was something else. She knew. She had known all along. I felt so much anger over everything that had happened, with my parents, with my brother, with everything. But at the same time, I almost wanted to laugh. In his rush to prove that Nick was his, my father had gotten it completely wrong. He must have thought the test showed the likelihood that I wasn't his daughter, like some kind of infidelity test. Maybe he assumed a low percentage meant no cheating or something like that. And now I have this knowledge, the information that could tear my family apart even more. My father hates knowing that I'm not his, but I'm not his favorite, Nick is. Learning that Nick isn't his will destroy him, and now that power is completely in my hands. I have the chance to ruin them all, starting with my father, the same man who threw me out of the house after considering me his daughter for years. Well, maybe considering is too strong of a word. He always treated me like an unwanted guest in this family. Then there's Nick, who laughed like an idiot while I was being kicked out, thinking he had won somehow in his twisted mind. And my mother, who did nothing to defend me. This doesn't change much for her. She's still a cheater. But this could shake the entire family dynamic in ways I can't even imagine. So, what's the best way to drop this bomb? Update 1. A few days have passed, but I finally did what had been on my mind the most. I confronted my mother. I needed answers from her. My father's behavior didn't surprise me, but hers did. Did she really not care about her daughter? That was what I never expected from her. A few days ago, I asked to meet with her in private, away from the rest of the family. She made excuses, almost like she knew what was coming, but in the end, she agreed. We met at a quiet cafe in town, and the moment I sat across from her, I had so many questions that the words just poured out. I asked the thing that hurt me the most: why didn't she defend me? Then I kept going. Why didn't she stop him from treating me like a stranger all these years? She could have made my life better if she had just told the truth, but instead, she stayed silent while I suffered through the life I was given. Her answer was complete garbage. She admitted that guilt had paralyzed her, not just from the affair, but from watching the entire family dynamic fall apart. She said she always felt trapped between protecting me and keeping the peace with my father, who, by the way, had only grown colder toward her over the years. She said that even though she stayed silent, it was the only way to maintain some kind of stability in our family, though now she realized it came at my expense. I told her I didn't buy that excuse. Stability at what cost? My self-esteem? My mental health? I told her that as my mother, it was her responsibility to defend me, but she failed. Her guilt, her fear, whatever reason she had for staying quiet didn't justify the years of neglect and emotional abuse I endured. I also told her I was done being everyone's scapegoat. I didn't care what excuses my father or Nick came up with to justify how they treated me. They didn't matter, but her silence, that hurt the most. She was supposed to be my protector. She apologized, but you can't just apologize for something like this. The only reason I was even hearing that apology was because I confronted her. She didn't come to me out of guilt or regret. She said she wished she had been braver, that she never stood up to my father for my sake. She admitted she let Nick become the golden child because she thought it would keep my father calm and their marriage intact. Her priorities were clear: her marriage first, then her husband, maybe Nick, and then finally me. She might feel bad for me, but no one in that family actually wants me. I don't regret confronting her. It was long overdue, and I finally said what I needed to say. But now it's time to focus on my father and Nick. I want to see their faces when I tell them the truth. Should I have done it before speaking to my mother? Maybe. But I also know she's a complete coward who will take this secret to the grave if she can. So, I trust that I'll still be the first to spill it. Update 2. A few more days have passed. After my confrontation with my mother, she reached out to me again. She begged me to meet with her, saying she had something important to tell me. Honestly, I didn't think I needed to hear her out. She had already said everything I needed to know, both directly and indirectly. I didn't need more from her. At one point in my life, I wanted her to be a real mother to me, but by now, we all know she was never fit for the role. But something about the way she pleaded made me think she might actually have something worth listening to. At the last moment, I changed my mind and agreed. I wasn't expecting much, but the moment she opened her mouth, I knew this wasn't just another round of fake regret. She confessed that she actually doesn't know who Nick's biological father is. How could she not know? I couldn't help but laugh at her. I asked her straight up, just how unfaithful did she have to be to lose track of something like that? My words were harsh and I could see that they hurt her, but I didn't care. I wasn't about to soften my words for a woman who had caused so much damage and never did anything to stop it. She broke down. Tears, the whole act, trying to get me to pity her. She claimed she felt neglected and unloved in her marriage. She said my father, Robert, had always been cold and distant, even in the early years of their relationship. She had hoped things would improve after marriage, but they didn't. She felt trapped, lonely, and desperate to escape the emptiness she felt at home. Now, I may be the last person on earth to defend my father, but that doesn't mean I'm going to take my mother's side either. My opinion? My father deserved to be cheated on, and my mother deserves every consequence of doing it. But two negatives don't make a positive, just destruction. And in that destruction, I was collateral damage. I had two selfish, irresponsible parents. I reminded her that, no matter how unhappy she was, she chose to stay, chose to be unfaithful, and chose to ruin my life in the process. She sacrificed me, her own daughter, on the altar of a toxic marriage. And the irony? She stayed for stability, yet not a single person in this family, including her, has ever had stability. The reason she doesn't know who Nick's father is? She hooked up with random men in bars for years, claiming it was her way of escaping her misery, even if just for a moment. She called herself stupid, selfish, and full of regret for the choices she made. I agree with those adjectives, but honestly, even they feel like an understatement. Same goes for my father. But at the end of the day, it all felt like one of those apologies people only give when they've been caught. It wasn't real remorse. She didn't feel bad for what she did. She felt bad because she got exposed. Then, I made a sarcastic remark about how lucky she was that Nick looked so much like our father. I joked, ironically of course, that she must have had a radar for men with similar features. My goal was obviously to mock her, but the second the words left my mouth, something shifted. Her face froze. Her eyes widened. She took a sharp breath, like a light bulb had just gone off in her head. She whispered that there was one possibility she had never considered before. One she hoped wasn't true, but was probably the most likely of them all. She said it was possible, even probable, that Nick's biological father was my dad's brother. My uncle, David. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was pure gold. Every time my mother revealed something new, it was even worse than before, but worse for my father, which in a twisted way made it better for me. There she was, sitting across from me, confessing that she might have had an affair with her husband's brother. That Nick could be either my cousin or my half-brother. I don't even know which one comes first. After that, I left. She didn't seem to have anything else to tell me. Not yet, at least. Now, I'm actually afraid to meet with my mother again. Who knows what's next? Maybe she'll say she had an affair with an alien, or that my father is actually her cousin. At this point, every time I sit down with her, she drops something even more disturbing. Although the real person who should be sweating right now, that would be my father. Just like the main character in a horror movie when the killer is right behind them. But this also widens my range of options when it comes to breaking the news to him. Honestly, I'm glad I've been busy and haven't had that talk with him yet. If I had rushed into it, I would have missed out on all of this. Now, I'm wondering, should I wait another month? Who knows what else might come out that I can use to my advantage. Update 3. Shortly after I left following my mother's confession about the possibility of Nick being my uncle's son, she started bombarding me with calls and messages. The only problem with these messages was that they were completely against what I wanted to do, reveal everything and watch it all go up in flames. She begged me not to ruin the family, not to destroy her marriage, and to consider, and I quote, the bigger picture. I might ruin the family, but only for those who deserve it. I don't care about Nick, my uncle, my father, or her, because they're all terrible people. The more messages I received, the angrier I became. It was never about apologizing to me. It was always about her own selfish motives, about protecting her marriage. Because even though my father knew about her infidelity, he never threw her out. My mother watched as they threw me out instead and thought, better her than me. Well, now what I think is better karma than her. I have all the evidence, the paternity test my father misinterpreted, plus all the messages from my mother. At this point, it's purely about revenge, and I won't deny it. But no one can say this revenge hasn't been a long time coming. It's something I need, and it's going to feel beautiful when it finally starts unfolding like a rising tide. Nothing will be left standing. Not my parents' marriage, not my brother's relationship with my father, and definitely not Nick's stupid grin. Yes, I think that last part might be the most satisfying of all. I know some people might question the path I'm taking, the need for revenge, but they took everything from me and still found new ways to make me suffer. It's time for someone else to feel that pain. And who better than the people who made my life as miserable as possible, especially since they enjoyed every second of it. I won't feel any guilt because now it's my turn to enjoy. And before I forget, thanks to everyone who answered my question about my relation to Nick. So apparently he's both my brother and my cousin. Also, shout out to the joke about my family sounding like European royalty. Update 4. Now I can finally sit down and write about what happened when I confronted my father and Nick. And trust me, I'm enjoying writing this just as much, if not more, than I enjoyed watching it unfold. You can even ask my friend Sophia because she was there to witness the whole thing, basically with front row VIP seats to the drama. I asked my father for one last meeting, using the excuse that I still had a few things to pick up from the house and that we needed to discuss some final details. He agreed, which honestly surprised me. Armed with the DNA results, my mother's messages, and my thirst for revenge, I walked into that meeting ready to lay everything out on the table. It was exactly what my father did to me weeks ago, so now it was my turn. The tension in the room was unbearable from the moment I stepped in. My mother looked absolutely terrified the second she saw me, probably because she was the only one who knew what was coming. That must have felt like pure torture. Nick sat there, as arrogant as ever, probably assuming I was there to beg for another chance to stay. My father, on the other hand, had the same cold, emotionless expression he always had around me, like this was just another routine obligation to get through. But by the time I was finished, everything had changed. I turned to my father and handed him the DNA results, telling him I was giving them back since I didn't want to keep them. But I added that he should take a closer look this time because the first time he read them, he had interpreted them completely wrong. I pointed out that if he actually read carefully, he'd see a note above the percentage explaining what the results actually meant. The moment I said that, he panicked, quickly putting on his glasses to read more carefully. He spent over a minute scanning the paper, while I took the opportunity to watch Nick's and my mother's faces shift. And that was my favorite part. My mother's face went pale, though honestly, it wasn't much paler than it already was. Nick, on the other hand, hadn't really changed his expression. Not until I laid it all out for him. I told him exactly what the DNA results said. I was my father's biological daughter, but he wasn't. That's when the smug look on his face vanished, and panic set in, just like it had for my father a few seconds earlier. But things only got worse. My father was finally processing what was happening, and Nick kept asking him if the results really said what I had just claimed. My father, now furious, turned to my mother and demanded to know who Nick's father was. That's when I answered for her, saying there was a possibility it was his own brother. Now, technically, there wasn't, because if that were the case, the test results would have shown some kind of familial connection. But I wasn't about to let that little detail stop me from mentioning that, out of all the men my mother had been with, his brother was one of them. Then, I simply told them they had a lot to talk about, turned to Sophia and said it was time for us to leave. Our job here was done. As we walked out, we could still hear my father and Nick screaming at each other from inside the house. So yeah, things went exactly as planned. A few days later, the messages from my father started coming in. He left voice messages, texted me until I finally blocked him. But from the ones I did listen to, it was all the same. Apologies, attempts to reconnect, and whatever else he thought would get me to respond. But I haven't, and I never will. A piece of paper doesn't change the fact that I have zero interest in having a relationship with him. My mother, on the other hand, didn't even get the chance to say anything. I blocked her before she could, just like I did with my father. And while I doubt Nick would reach out, I went ahead and blocked him too, just to be safe. I don't know what will happen with the rest of my family now, but one thing's for sure, this isn't over for them. But for me, I'm done. It's time to sit back, watch the bomb I just dropped explode, and enjoy the chaos. I deserve it. I've been working toward this for far too long. Update 5. Now, let's talk about the fallout from my last update because trust me, you're going to want to hear this. And not just because it's my story, but because, objectively, this is some next-level drama. Let's start with my parents. They're officially separated and filing for divorce. Technically, it was my father who filed for divorce, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. Their marriage is over. He packed up and left, leaving my mother and Nick behind in the house. Why did he leave instead of kicking them out? No idea. But that's the situation. What I do know is that he didn't take the light of his life, his golden boy, his reason for existing, Nick. Nick is no longer any of those things. Now, he's just the product of my mother's infidelity. But if you think that was harsh, you might want to brace yourself for how he feels about his brother. Because, as it turns out, my uncle took a paternity test, and it confirmed what I had already said: Nick isn't his son. My mother got lucky that Nick happened to look like him, because otherwise, this whole lie would have unraveled way sooner. And as much as Nick wanted my uncle to be his father, just so he could have someone to call dad, it didn't pan out. That smug, cocky laugh he used to have, completely gone since the day I dropped the truth bomb at my parents' house. And from what I've been told, it hasn't come back since. Now, he's desperate to find out who his real father is, because apparently he needs someone to spoil him the way my father used to. But that's going to take some time. Considering my mother slept with men whose names she probably doesn't even remember, I have no clue how she's supposed to track down the right one. And even if she does, I highly doubt he'll treat Nick the way my father did when he thought they were related by blood. Oh, and speaking of my father and uncle, their little family dispute ended up turning physical, with my grandparents having to step in and separate them. From what I heard, since I have no experience with fights myself, my father was the one losing after throwing some pretty nasty insults at my uncle. As for the rest of the family, they're staying out of it. No one's picking a side because honestly they can't decide who's worse: my father for abandoning 2 kids in such a short time, or my uncle for just existing. Not that it really matters to me. My relationship with my grandparents isn't much better than the one I have with my parents, but that's a story for another time. Now let's wrap this up with my mother. As I mentioned, she's still living with Nick, but they're not exactly talking to each other. Nick is only staying because he has nowhere else to go, but if he did, he'd probably be long gone by now. Oh, and here's the kicker: my father is suing my mother for paternity fraud. It would almost be funny if it weren't so painful, because let's not forget, when I was the one he thought wasn't his child, he stayed with my mother. He wasn't even thinking about suing her. But now that Nick has been taken away from him, suddenly, it's unforgivable in his eyes. I guess there's still one last update to go, covering the lawsuit and the final consequences. But don't expect it to be soon, or very long. Update 6. Don't say I didn't warn you. Took a while and it's short, but at least it's an update. My father won the lawsuit against my mother. He still hasn't spoken to his brother or Nick. Nick has tried reaching out to him, probably because he still doesn't know who his real father is and is hoping my dad will take him back. Honestly, my father isn't talking to anyone these days. Since no one in the family was willing to cut ties with his brother, he decided to cut ties with all of them instead. Meanwhile, my mother ended up kicking Nick out of the house, most likely because he still refuses to speak to her. Maybe that's another reason he's suddenly so desperate to get back in my father's good graces. And that's it. Nothing else has really changed in my family because after the revenge I got, everything changed.